everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into something that you might think is pretty straightforward, like being good at English, but I think you'll find it's a lot more nuanced than you might expect.
Yeah, definitely.
We're looking at this Cambridge English article called Benefits of Testing the Four Skills: Reading, Listening, Writing, and Speaking.
Okay.
And it really gets into some interesting points because I think a lot of us, we just assume that if someone is fluent, they're good at, all parts of the language. But is that really true?
Yeah, and that's something that the article, really highlights right from the start,
Mm-hmm.
is this idea that learners very often have, kind of particular strengths and weaknesses.
Right.
So you might have, somebody who's, an fantastic at reading, really complex academic texts,
Right.
but then, put them in a situation where they have to, keep up with a fast conversation, and they might really struggle.
And it makes me think about like all the different ways that we use English in our lives now, too.
Yeah.
It's not just, reading novels or, writing emails anymore.
English is everywhere, and it's become so essential for, things like, further education, career advancement, that, if you're missing even one of those skills, it can really limit your opportunities.
Yeah, it's not just about a test score anymore.
Yeah,
Exactly. It's about being able to actually, participate.
Yeah. And speaking of different, ways to break down, English and fluency and all that, the article mentions this system that I've heard of but never really understood, like the Common European Framework of Reference.
Okay.
And they even go so far as to say, like, speaking is actually two skills,
Mm-hmm.
production and interaction.
Right. And I'm thinking like, is that the difference between like giving a presentation versus, just chatting with a colleague? Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good analogy.
Okay.
So, spoken production is all about, delivering information,
Mm-hmm.
clearly, often in a kind of formal setting. So things like speeches or presentations,
Okay.
whereas spoken interaction is much more spontaneous.
Right.
So it's about, being able to, quickly understand what someone is saying,
Mm-hmm.
pick up on their cues and then respond appropriately.
Right.
It's what, allows a conversation to flow naturally.
So it's like two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, absolutely.
You need both to be like truly, an effective communicator.
Exactly.
Okay, so this is where I think it gets really fascinating. The article mentions this data from Cambridge English,
Okay.
where they looked at over 465,000 exam takers.
Wow.
And they found that the relationships between the different skills are only moderate.
Hmm.
So, like, even if you're an amazing reader, it doesn't mean you're automatically going to be an amazing speaker.
That's right. And I think that really challenges this very common assumption that, language proficiency is just this one big thing.
Right.
When actually it seems to suggest that we need to have a much more nuanced understanding of, how these different skills work together.
So, like, based on that, do you think schools should, like, focus on teaching all of the skills, like, equally?
Well, I mean, I think that's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
And I don't think the article is necessarily advocating for, a really rigid approach where, every single lesson has to have a reading component, a writing component, and so on.
Right.
But it's definitely encouraging, I think, a more balanced approach to language learning.
Okay.
One that, really aims to prepare students for, for the real world.
So it's not just about acing the test, it's about actually, like, being able to use it.
Exactly. And, the article actually mentions some research which suggests that, ministries and school are increasingly choosing Cambridge exams
Uh-huh.
because they focus on speaking and listening in addition to reading and writing.
Okay.
The idea being that, this leads to students, developing better overall communication skills,
Yeah, that makes sense.
which benefits them in the long run.
Yeah, because think about it from, like, an employer's perspective. Would you rather hire someone who, like, writes brilliant reports
Right.
but can't hold a conversation in a meeting, or someone who can, like, do both?
Yeah, and that's a really key point. And actually the article delves into this kind of workplace relevance of all four skills
Okay.
with some really interesting examples. So for instance, they highlight, research that Cambridge English has done on employer priorities.
Okay.
And what they found is that speaking and listening skills are now just as highly valued as reading and writing skills in lots of professional settings.
So we've got, we've seen that all four skills matter for learning and also, like, in these real world situations.
Yeah.
But how does that translate to, our own lives? Like, most of us listening aren't, in school anymore.
That's a great question. And it makes me think about, how we can actually apply this knowledge about the 4 skills.
Yeah, like if I know I'm a weaker speaker, is there anything I can like do specifically to get better?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, the article kind of hints at this when it's talked about eh, all the different exams that Cambridge offers.
Mm-hmm.
They have the big comprehensive ones that test everything, but they also have, these more targeted assessments,
Okay.
like Bulatz or Lynn-Kraskill, which are designed to really zero in on specific skills
Oh, that's interesting.
that might be really crucial for, a particular job.
So it's not like one size fits all.
Exactly. It really recognizes that, while being well-rounded is great,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you need to, hone in on a particular set of skills.
Right.
Imagine you're applying for a translation job.
Okay.
Being a fantastic speaker might be a nice bonus,
Right.
but those reading and writing skills are going to be absolutely critical.
Yeah, it's like having different tools in your toolbox.
Exactly.
Right? Like you might not need every tool for every job,
Yeah,
but you want to make sure that you have the right ones when you need them.
exactly. And I think it really underscores this importance of understanding, the context and the purpose of any kind of language assessment.
Uh-huh.
Are we trying to gauge, overall proficiency, or are we looking for, very specific abilities?
Right.
And once we know that, then we can choose the right tools and approaches.
This is making me realize like how much I took for granted about just being good at English.
Yeah,
It's really a lot more complicated than I thought.
it is. And that's kind of what makes language so fascinating, right? It's
Yeah.
not just a tool for communication,
Right.
but it's this window into, how we think, how we learn, how we interact with the world around us.
And speaking of interacting, like I keep coming back to that idea of like the spoken production versus the spoken interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think I just lumped those together in my mind before.
And it's a common misconception, I think.
Yeah.
We tend to think of spoken as just, this one thing.
Right.
But as we said, there are these, quite subtle but important differences,
Mhm.
right? Giving a prepared presentation where you've had time to plan
Right.
and practice requires a very different skill set than, navigating a spontaneous conversation
That's so
where
true.
you have to think on your feet.
Because with a presentation, you're like in control of the
It's-
flow.
yeah.
But a conversation is like you're constantly adapting,
Yeah.
like responding and like trying to stay engaged.
And that's precisely why, assessing both spoken production and spoken interaction is so important
Mm.
because it gives us this, much richer, more complete picture of someone's, communicative competence.
This makes me think about like my own language learning experiences. Like I had plenty of classes where we focus on like grammar and vocabulary,
Uh-huh.
but did we actually focus on those interactive speaking skills?
And that's a really important point. And I think, traditional language teaching very often, really emphasizes, reading and writing.
Mm-hmm.
But, there are definitely ways that you can specifically target, those interactive skills.
Right.
So, things like role-playing or simulations,
Uh-huh.
or even just, structured group discussions can be really effective.
It's like we're breaking down this wall of assumptions about language learning.
Yeah.
And it's making me wonder, like, if all of this applies to English, what about other languages? Does it matter just as much if you're learning like Spanish or Mandarin or something?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And, it kind of gets to the heart of like, what does it actually mean to be proficient in a language? Regardless of what language we're talking about.
Right. It's not just about the words. It's
With-
about connecting with people,
Exactly.
sharing ideas,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
navigating, these different cultural contexts.
Exactly. And to do that effectively, you really need that, that diverse set of skills.
Mm-hmm.
Think about if you're traveling in, a Spanish-speaking country.
Right.
Being able to read signs and menus is helpful, but it's not going to get you very far if you can't understand what people are saying to you
Right.
or, express your own needs and thoughts.
It's like we've uncovered this whole new layer of what it means to learn a language.
Yeah.
It's not just about memorizing vocabulary and grammar rules.
It's about developing this